Profesör Robinson ve yine Summer Camp tarafında Angel'la beraber bir webinar etkinliği gerçekleştireceğiz. Angel, you can start from here.
Okay, well, thank you, Emre, and welcome to today's webinar, and thank you all of you for joining us. It's a real pleasure to introduce our guest, Professor Jason Robinson, Head of the Department of Material Science and Metallurgy at the University of Cambridge. Professor Robinson is one of Cambridge's key science and technology departments, shaping both cutting-edge research and the training of a student and researcher working on the material challenges that define modern industry. Professor Robinson is also a fellow and director of studies at St. John's College, deeply involved in the admission, study, and welfare of students. I'm always really excited to talk to him. Also, I want to add that we have with us my colleague Maria, and Maria will help with any question you have about our summer program. So let's start the webinar. I would like to ask Professor Robinson about the academic journey, no? Because we don't have many opportunities to talk a Cambridge professor. So probably the people who are with us would like to know, how do you become a Cambridge professor? So please tell us a little bit.
Yeah, I'm very happy to say a few words about that. First, it's really nice to be here. So thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me. So how did I become a professor? That's a very good question. It wasn't necessarily something I planned like that. I started my career reading physical sciences at Imperial College in London, which is a science and technology focused institution in the heart of the city in an area called Kensington. That was a 4-year undergraduate degree program. So it was an integrated undergraduate and master's degree. At the end of my 3rd year, I experienced an interesting turning point because I got funding from a livery company in London called the Worshipful Company of Armourers and Braziers, and they paid for me to go to the United States. And specifically, I spent time at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, working there with a lady called Professor Caroline Ross, who is now deputy head, if not head, of the material science department at the MIT. When I was with Caroline, I did experimental research primarily on magnets, specifically on very thin magnetic films, thin being a few nanometers in thickness. And when I was in her group, I developed a very keen interest in magnetic materials for memory and logic-based applications. And when I was with her, I had this idea that I could combine these magnetic thin films with superconductors. And it was through that interest I then discovered there was a really great group at Cambridge under a guy called Professor Mark Blumeyer, who was working specifically in that field. So I then decided to move from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology to Cambridge. And that's how I ended up at the University of Cambridge. Started my PhD in 2004, finished it in 2007. And what I was working on over that period of 3 years was trying to understand how magnets and superconductors interact in tiny little devices called Josephson junctions. That work was very successful. I published a number of very interesting high-impact papers. At the end of my PhD, I was very lucky. I applied for what's called a junior research fellowship in Cambridge at St. John's College. These are very nice fellowships because they enable you to start an independent career directly after your PhD. You get funding for 3/4 years. And when I was in my 3rd year of my junior research fellowship at St. John's, I applied for 10 years of funding from the UK Royal Society, which is basically the most prestigious scientific academy in the UK. And I got that funding, which then set me up for a independent career for at least the next 10 years in Cambridge. And in the middle of that independent group setting, I got my permanent position as a lecturer. After a year, I was promoted to what was then called a readership, and then about 18 months later, I was promoted to a professor. So that's how I ended up going from a PhD student in 2004 to a full professor in 2018.
Wow.
And then in 2020, I somehow became joint head of department, and then from 2025, solo head of department.
Wow,
None
very
of this is
impressive.
necessarily planned. All of this is determined by my interest in science and ultimately curiosity.
Very impressive. Thank you. Okay, you have been in a top organization. I would like to know what makes the University of Cambridge special, because there is something special about this university.
Yes, that's a very good question, Angelo. The thing for me that's most striking about Cambridge is the fact it's not a hierarchical system, despite all of these fancy titles. Undergraduates, master students, PhD students, postdocs, and faculty intermix. What drives us in Cambridge is our academic studies, whether that's learning something or developing new knowledge. And that is the thing that brings us all together. So, for example, if you were an undergraduate in Cambridge, something that's very special is between 3 and 4 hours per week, you will sit with another student and a professor discussing your subject with them in a very small environment. That is a unique situation, at least in the UK. That happens to some extent in all universities, but in Cambridge and Oxford, that's one of the key ways in which we teach undergraduate students. We spend time with undergraduates and we help them, we inspire them, and we develop them and build them for research or industry, or if they're in the humanities in equivalent stages in those areas. So we nurture education, we nurture curiosity, and we nurture academic relationships, which are not just within a subject, but cross-disciplinary. So, for example, today at lunch, I sat with someone who is an economist. I also sat with someone who is in the English department. So I get to spend time with people who are working on, for example, medieval French literature, or I could the next day be sat with someone who's working on John Keats' poems. So it's a diverse, really exciting environment. That's what makes Cambridge very special.
Wow, thank you. And you are one of the leading professors teaching on the UniHive summer courses and the chair of our charity initiative, FRI. Can you tell us a little bit more about your role and the experience from your perspective?
Yes, very happy to do so. So I'm a course leader, and in that role, I help students develop and experience academic life in Cambridge, not just as an outsider, if you like, observing, but actually getting the opportunity to feel what it's like to be a Cambridge student. So, for example, on all of the courses that we run on UniHive, students attend lectures, they write literature reviews, and very importantly, they experience what a supervision is like. Students on the UniHive program get to spend time with academics in order to learn about not just the things they're hearing in the lectures, but really the state of the art. And I think that's what makes UniHive very special, because it's able to replicate the teaching and learning and research environment in Cambridge within a summer program, which I think is very special.
Because you treat the student, even that they are from 14 to 18, you treat them like university students, no?
Yes, indeed. So it doesn't actually really matter what age you are or what stage you are at in your career. One of the best ways to inspire early career or young people in education is to be able to sit down with them and actually have a conversation with them. They can hear the views of an expert, and at the same time, as an expert, I can get to hear their views as someone that's at a very different stage in their educational career.
Okay, thank you. You told us already what the student can expect. I would like to know the difference between teaching younger students between your regular student that you do during the academic year.
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
What is the difference between teaching younger students, like the one we have during the summer program, and regular students that you have during the academic year at the University of Cambridge?
To be honest, I don't think it is so different. I think it's very similar. You know, one thing that Cambridge academics are very good at is calibrating the level on the room. So one thing I will be doing actively when I'm teaching on a UniHive course is really trying to understand the level in the room and ensuring that everyone in that room is able to understand the key elements of what I'm teaching. And it's not just, you know, it's not because you're young, but you can't necessarily access the literature. I mean, my job as an academic is to ensure that I have a good understanding of the level in that room, and I'm able to engage proactively with the individuals in that room. And one way in which I achieve that through UniHive is I'm one of those dynamic lecturers. I expect students in the room to participate in the learning process. Students often arrive very shy and anxious to do that, but actually by the end of even the first day, most students have had the opportunity to come up to the board and partake proactively in the learning journey. And it's through that, you know, bilateral relationship between a student in the class and the professor that you can really push people's understanding to the next level. And that's exactly how we like to teach in Cambridge. Teaching should be bilateral, it should be dynamic, and it should be based around the community in the room.
Thank you. And I sometimes when I talk to parents who want to send their children to our program, sometimes a lot of them ask me the same question. Does my child need to be an expert on the subject they choose? Because they think that maybe they will not be able to cope. What would you are going to teach? What would you say to those parents?
No, parents mustn't worry about, you know, every student in a class, even if you're a first year undergraduate in Cambridge, will have a different context and a different learning experience. My job and the job of other professors on this course is to ensure that we are delivering accessible material and developing each child case by case, but also as a class. So a lot of the material we teach, we start at an appropriate level. So we ensure that everyone at least has the right base level of understanding, and then we gradually develop that. And the thing that's really cool about UniHive and indeed Cambridge more generally is because we get to sit down with individual students, we very quickly get to understand and appreciate what level a student is at. So for example, if it's a course which requires detailed mathematical calculations, I'm not going to assume everyone in that room can do difficult differentiation or calculus. I'm going to make an effort to be able to bring people up to the level they need to be at in order to access my curriculum. The idea in UniHive isn't simply to brain dump lots of complicated information and material on the students, it's to inspire them. So we don't necessarily have to, you know, start a topic quite high up. It can actually be quite low level, but we're getting students to think about topics perhaps more laterally than they're used to. We're getting students to ask questions. You know, you can read a textbook and be told something, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And so we can try and unpick those topics and try and build students' confidence to ask questions and to engage proactively in a conversation around what might be quite complex, nuanced subjects.
Okay, thank you. What do you think that the student will take after the course with them that they can? Because some of the heads that I talked to from different international schools, they tell me that some teacher, when they are teaching the student who came to do the course, notice a difference in the way they do a presentation, in the way they do a research.
You know, curiosity is all about asking questions, right? Having the confidence to ask questions. When we teach in Cambridge to undergraduates, or when I teach students on UniHive, I'm trying to give students the toolkit to be able to really activate their curiosity, to question everything, but to do it systematically and coherently. So I think, at least I notice, a lot of students that start at UniHive are quite shy and introverted. but by the end of the course, they're asking really good questions and they have confidence to ask those questions. And I think that's one of the best ways of preparing anyone for a university study. You know, if I look back at my own school education, it was quite rare that a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old would be able to sit down with their teacher and really think quite deeply and potentially laterally about their subject. But that's what an undergraduate admissions interview would look like, whether it's in Cambridge or other top universities all over the world. It's, can that student engage at a low, medium, and high level in a debate or conversation around a complex subject? And so at UniHive, that's one of the great gifts we try to impart to our students, to be able to sit down and to question and to engage in active dialogue with somebody that may be considered to be an expert in that field.
Okay, thank you. Your course is physics and engineering. Can you tell us a little bit about your course? Because probably some students.
So the thing that's really exciting about the material I specifically teach in UniHive is that it really overlaps with my research. But I will teach it at an appropriate level for the room. Now, one thing that I do in my research is I make nanoscale devices. What do I mean by that? I could start with a bulk material like gold, and I might machine it down to something which is just a few nanometers in size. And I might, for example, perform physics or chemistry experiments to understand how size affects behavior. Behavior could be magnetic, it could be optical, etc. And what I will teach you on this course is how do we practically make such small devices using a whole range of different techniques. So you will, for example, learn how to make, theoretically, a thin film of a metal, which could be 1 nanometer thick. How do I then characterize that material? What are the different techniques we use in physics and chemistry to be able to probe the underlying properties of that material? Now, all of that, of course, at this stage will feel quite daunting, but I will take you through concepts that you already know about or have heard about at school, and I will develop them further so you can see exactly how we can apply what is frankly 14 and 15-year-old physics to real-world applications.
Another question is, can you tell us how is a regular day learning when you're during the course that you are teaching?
Yeah, so a regular day might start, for example, with me giving an introductory lecture in the morning, followed by a break, followed by a more in-depth lecture. Now, if it were your first lecture with me, that first lecture would probably be more about me trying to know a bit more about you. Then I will give some introductory material. There'll be a break, then we'll take that a bit further. You'll probably go and have lunch, maybe visit the city, and then there could be another lecture before dinner, for example. And there are opportunities from the beginning to the end to interact with me and other academics socially as well. So, for example, there's dinners, which are really important. So you'll get to hear me in a out of education context where we can have interesting discussions over dinner. I can help, in some sense, probe your interest, and it wouldn't necessarily even be in my subject. It could be in other subjects, including chemistry or biology, subjects which I'm certainly no expert in, but have some interest and education in, of course. And we'll also be able to talk about, you know, other topics. That's the cool thing about Cambridge. You'll also get to meet people working in very different fields, including computer science, Italian, education. And these people will specifically want to talk to you, not me. They want to be there to talk to you. So you'll get the opportunity of intermixing in a very diverse, interdisciplinary environment from day one to the day you leave.
And your student, they have to, well, like all the students that we have for this program about research, they have to do a research proposal, right?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about it, please.
Yeah, so as a scientist, one of the things I spend a lot of my time doing is reading the literature in order to identify questions which I want to tackle. So one element of my course, and I know this is replicated on other courses within UniHive, is we teach you how to actually read papers. And from reading those papers, we teach you how to construct a problem, a question, and how you can frame that question within a context. That's what we call a research proposal. You identify a problem, you contextualize it, and you explain why that is an important problem to solve. So on my course, not only will you get lectures specifically around nanofabrication, for example, I will help you alongside demonstrators and supervisors identify interesting problems or questions and how to frame that within a research literature review and or proposal. And that really is a very good skill to be able to learn. And there's no reason why a 14, 15 or 16-year-old or 18-year-old can't start learning how to frame questions. In fact, it's extremely important. Most of my career is about framing questions and reading literature and motivating people like you and the government to fund me. So learning how to do that from an early stage, I think, is very important and helpful. And most importantly, very interesting.
I suppose that, well, are you still, can you see also a student impressing you that you say, oh my God, this student or these students are really impressive, because you are used to have brilliant students, but when during the summer, I suppose too, and they come from all over the world, different cultures.
You know, the great thing about being young is you don't have so much prejudice. So you can, in fact, ask those tangential questions and not feel embarrassed about asking them. So yes, it does happen at UniHive that students will ask me questions that will, you know, really surprise me. In fact, I think it happens quite regularly. And it, you know, doesn't take very much learning and spending time with academics and reading the literature before you do start asking those interesting questions. You know, if you take any subject and you read a textbook on that subject, virtually anything you read, particularly in the sciences, will be based on a series of assumptions. And so the strength of that theory is dependent on the weakest assumption in the chain of assumptions that's been made. And so what I will try and teach you, and indeed you probe me on, is how strong those assumptions are. That's what scientists do, right? We probe problems by eliminating certain assumptions, questioning certain assumptions, and introducing new ones. That's how we push the boundaries.
Okay.
And so, yes, I have met many students on UniHive that surprised me.
And now one question that probably a lot of parents have in mind. If you haven't visited Cambridge, sometimes it's difficult because you always have the idea, because the normal thing is when you go to a city and you go to visit the university is a small part of the city. But in Cambridge, it's difficult because even if someone asks you when you are in Cambridge, where is the campus of the university, what would you say? Because try to explain this to the parents and also tell them, because I think it's a very safe place and it's a wonderful place. So they feel good about it, because if you have never been, it's hard.
Yeah, so if you take most cities, there happen to be universities, right? Somewhere. Cambridge, the entire city is somehow part of the university. You know, we've not talked about how Cambridge as an institution works, but you've got this massive university that has departments across multiple different schools. You know, you've got English, you've got medicine, you've got biology, you've got engineering. Those are all part of the university. In addition to that, there are 31 colleges. And so if you're in the city centre of Cambridge, there's these 31 colleges immersed all around you. So, you know, you can take a main road, a side road, somewhere, in some part, there's going to be some element of the university present there. So it is a all immersing experience to be in Cambridge. You've got many medieval colleges, and then you've got a number of very modern colleges. Most of them are open to the public, some of them free access, some of them you have to pay. Of course, students on UniHive will be going through all of these colleges constantly and having lectures in them. So it will be a very fun experience. And unlike a tourist who experiences it mainly through the lens of their camera, students on UniHive will actually have the experience of being lectured in these really exciting medieval environments. Plus, students, at least on my course, will also get to see my lab. So they get to see what a state-of-the-art laboratory looks like. And they'll be able to see what my daily routine looks like, from spending time in my office doing administrative work, all the way through to reading papers, going into the lab, having these scientific dialogues with my group members. And hopefully they might even see some of those exciting eureka moments when we've measured something for the first time and we actually can make some sense of it. Yeah, it's a fun place to be, Cambridge.
Yeah, and the last question is, what would you say to the student or to the parent to encourage them to come to our courses, and especially how this course can help them to have experience when they go to university? It doesn't matter to which university. If you go abroad or you go away from your home, it will help you too, no?
Yeah, so in many ways, I've already touched on this question. For me, I think the best thing that all students access and get out of UniHive is they get to learn to really push their curiosity in a very embracing environment. We love questions in Cambridge, and we really want students to learn how to ask questions. And learning to ask good questions takes time, actually. There's no bad question, but obviously you can tune a question, you can refine it, you can improve it. And we will, on UniHive, teach students to be bold, to ask questions, to read the literature, to refine their questions, and to prepare themselves fundamentally for independent and also collaborative thinking. That is a skill which students can take to any university or workplace, which is immensely useful.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Not only academic, but the fact that they will see how a university works, no? By the time
Exactly so, Angel.
Okay, well, I don't have any more questions because I want to leave time for all of you to ask questions. Emre, do you have any questions for Professor Robinson? Or we have some, I think we have some questions, right? Emre, you are mute.
Sorry. So there are two questions. So there's one in English already. So are Oxford and Cambridge rivals or sisters?
Are they what, sorry?
Rivals or sisters?
That's a good question.
We're
Like
good
competitors,
friends.
yeah.
We're good friends. Yeah. Rivalry is mainly for the newspapers.
So there was another one. So for the personal statement, the student is asking what to do in the personal statement to kind of like have the hook to get attention and pass through the other students, like, have a better personal statement. What do they need to be careful on?
Is this the personal statement specifically for someone applying to Cambridge?
Yes, I think University of Cambridge they're asking for.
Yeah, I guess the most important thing is not your personal statement, but your qualifications. And the thing about the personal statement is you've really got to show to the person reading it that you're a genuinely curious person. And of course, have the academic ability to back up that curiosity. Honesty is the most important thing. I've been involved in admissions for years, and some students will have these very exotic CVs, others will have more mundane CVs, but in both forms you can still demonstrate genuine interest and curiosity in a particular subject of your choosing. The things you read, the thoughts you have, the things you attend. If you attend, for example, this course, you'll be able to talk about how inspirational it was, not by saying it was inspirational, but by enthusiastically writing about the things you learn. And if it's not UniHive, it's some other experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
I hate this expression because it doesn't necessarily explain everything, but it frames it somewhat. The important thing is to show that you're real, right? Don't write about something that's not true. Don't talk about a book you've never read. Talk about the things that have really inspired you and why they have inspired your curiosity and interest in a particular subject.
Okay.
And
So
make sure it's written well.
there's 3 more questions. There's one with the UniHive. So how attending UniHive programs affect the application process to University of Cambridge and the reference letter they might receive during the UniHive course, like academic exploration, what is in it? Like, what does it refer to? So student is asking, like, how does it affect the Cambridge application once you attend the UniHive program?
Well, I wouldn't say that attending anything in particular directly benefits any application to any university. I think the point about UniHive is it helps you develop skills, and those skills will be useful to any university application that you make, whether it's here or Harvard or the Sorbonne in France. It's about developing you as an individual and developing your interests. Nothing specifically, well, nothing at all will ever benefit you in any university application you make. But the point is, as I've said, UniHive is an opportunity to develop your skill base, to develop your curiosity and your academic skill set, which is a good thing for any application you would make wherever, including industrial or other jobs you might apply for later in life.
Thank you.
Angel, there's one question. I think it's better you answer it. Like, so are they late for applying to UniHive?
No, we still have a few places, and now is a lot of students are applying now, especially after the Easter break. And yes, but we really don't have a deadline for the application. Is that each course is between 20 and 25 students, and when it's full, it's full. So my advice is if they want to apply, the sooner the better.
Okay. And there is one more. So what is the profile, like student profile for Cambridge University?
$1 million question.
We're looking for, I suppose, diversity with many different profiles, right? Ultimately and fundamentally, what we're looking for are students that are intelligent, extremely motivated, and curious. So you need to be able to somehow demonstrate all these aspects in any application, whether it's Cambridge, Oxford, or any other top university in UK or elsewhere, right? Everyone is looking for people that are smart, motivated, and curious, and of course, full of integrity. So you need to be able to show in any application that you have a genuine interest in the subject. If you're not academically strong enough to go to a place like Cambridge, there's really no point in coming here because it will not do you any good. What we're looking for is people that can really push their understanding, and financial background, educational background, etc., is not the driving thing here. It's really academic ability, genuine motivation, and curiosity. You need to be able to show that you're excited by your subject. That's really very important. And this is not something you can fake. When I'm meeting students at conferences, interviewing them in Cambridge, the students that are smart and genuinely motivated and curious, they give the game away immediately. For example, do you relish answering difficult questions? If you're the kind of person that gets given a very difficult question, whether it's a mathematical one or a question in biology or chemistry, does that make you excited even if you don't know the answer? Meaning you can apply what you know to get you as far as you can get with the base knowledge you have in answering that question. And in any Cambridge setting, when you're being interviewed or having a discussion with an academic, it's a dialogue, right? So where there are shortfalls, we can help fill those gaps. And then the question is, how do you take advantage of that information you've now been given to build on what your existing knowledge bases. And we will push, we push at every level, and not just along the question. We might then diagonalize and go tangential to the question, see how you can apply that new knowledge to a different scenario, or how can you combine two apparently distinct different topic areas and bring them together and discover what's new at the interface between those areas. New uncomfortable situations where students demonstrate a real relish for getting into the details and logically and systematically making sense of that problem. These are the kinds of people we're looking for.
Perfect. And another question. So how important is to choose the college in Cambridge? Can you choose a college in Unihive?
I don't think you can in Unihive. If you apply to Cambridge to be an undergraduate, a master's or a PhD student, it frankly doesn't matter which college you're in. They're all brilliant.
And I think last question is, are there any changes in the admission test like Oxford in Cambridge?
I don't know. I'm not aware of that. No.
Okay.
All of the admissions details are online if you want to know more about those.
Okay.
There is another one. Anyway,
There is another one?
Yeah. So what kind of extracurricular activities do you look for to see if an applicant is a good fit for Cambridge, regardless their chosen subject?
Simple. We don't care about any of them. It's good if you've done some other stuff, but it's not part of the selection criteria.
It's what you said that I think is really important. No, it's about doing these extracurricular activities to develop the skills that will help you to be a.
But yeah, doing rugby or being an expert kite flyer or whatever it might be, that will not affect or impact positively or negatively an application to Cambridge. We'll be pleased for you if you're good at chess. That's good. Good for you.
Okay. And I think okay, well, someone is sorry for joining late. Will you be sharing the webinar? Yes, we will email this webinar to all of you because it's being recorded. And I don't think we have any more questions. And it's always a pleasure to talk to Professor Robinson. Thank you. And thank you, Emre, for organizing the webinar. And thank you to all of you. And if you have any question, please contact us, and we will be happy to see you this summer if you decide to join. Okay?
Yeah, it'd be fantastic if you come.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye.